Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really challenging topic, navigating toxic work environments, especially when the toxicity flows down from management.
Yeah, it's such a real issue that so many people face every day. What really jumps out from the material is how, it's not just about a difficult boss, but a repeated pattern of behaviors that truly damage well-being.
Exactly. It's like if your boss is repeatedly demoralizing, micromanaging, or outright ignoring your input, then it's no mere personality conflict. It's a pattern that erodes your autonomy, sense of purpose, and even mental health. It's not
Hmm.
just a one-off bad day, it's a systematic issue.
Right. And what really struck me is that powerful statement. You know, people don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad managers. That really underscores how central management is to our everyday experience at work.
Absolutely. There's research that even equates the impact of a bad manager to that of a spouse, or, as some put it, even more critical than a doctor. It really puts into perspective how much our managers influence our overall well being.
Yeah. And then there are those vivid personal stories, like someone feeling completely unheard when their feedback is brushed off, or the endless micromanaging, where every tiny detail is scrutinized.
Exactly. And when that kind of behavior is constant, it creates a work environment that's draining. People end up feeling trapped in their roles, like there's no room for growth because every idea is dismissed or every effort is taken over. Literally having a boss who gets credit for your work. It's demoralizing.
Yeah, I read about a case where a manager demanded employees to come in 40 minutes early without pay. It reminds me of treating people like a factory line instead of, human beings.
Right. And that type of excessive control, constantly hovering like a bug on a windshield, really leads into the burnout crisis many employees face. This isn't merely about handling work, it's about safeguarding one's mental health.
And speaking of mental health, the sources were really clear on the toll these toxic environments take: burnout, stress, and even a sense of isolation from your team. It's like the boss's behavior permeates every aspect of work life.
Mhm. Exactly. One key strategy that came up repeatedly is the need to document the bad behavior, and not just for a record's sake, but to create an accurate timeline of events in case you ever need to report it, or heaven forbid, seek legal intervention.
Yes, documenting is crucial. But I wonder, what exactly should one document? It seems like there's a delicate balance.
Spot on. The guidelines stress following the 5 Ws: what happened, who was there, when it happened, where, and witnesses. Just the bare,
Hmm.
objective facts. Avoiding opinions or unnecessary commentary is crucial.
Right. Because if you get too emotional or add venting language, you risk undermining your credibility. The notes must be factual and free of inflammatory language.
Exactly. It's about protecting yourself. And another big piece of advice is not to use any work related devices to document this stuff. Your notes should be stored on something completely independent, like emailing yourself from a separate free email account.
Yeah, that part really resonated. The idea of creating a verifiable timestamp that's clearly off the company's system. So it's like establishing an untainted record of events, right?
Absolutely. It's a clever workaround because your work email or device is considered company property, and using those could backfire spectacularly. It's all about
Hmm.
safeguarding your evidence and ensuring you have something that stands up if ever questioned.
But isn't it a bit risky to document everything? I mean, couldn't this escalate things unnecessarily?
That's a fair point. Documentation isn't about capturing every little annoyance, it's about recording significant incidents, those moments of wrongful or unlawful behavior. So, you need to be discerning. Not every sigh or offhand comment qualifies.
I see. So you focus on incidents with clear impact, like public shaming, blatant micromanaging, or maybe even harassment, and then document those meticulously.
Exactly. And that documentation can be a lifesaver when talking to HR or a lawyer. It gives you the exact details and timeline needed to build a case, or at least understand the strength of your grievances. It's a critical tool if
Yeah.
things go beyond everyday stress.
Speaking of HR, what did the sources say about involving HR or even reaching out to trusted colleagues for support?
The advice was cautious. HR might seem like a go to option, but often they're more aligned with protecting the company than the individual. So, if you do decide to reach out, you need to be super strategic about it.
Hmm.
Trustworthy allies are key. Ideally, allies who can corroborate your experiences without putting themselves at risk.
That makes sense. There's that analogy of treating the toxic boss like a jammed printer, something you just have to work around until you can get a better machine, so to speak.
Right you are. And it introduces another strategy. If leaving isn't immediate, focus on doing your job well, maintaining professionalism, and setting boundaries.
Yeah.
That approach, while not a cure-all, helps create some emotional distance from the negativity.
But what about actually giving feedback or confronting the situation with the boss? Did the sources weigh in on that?
They did, sort of, but with a caveat. Feedback can sometimes be useful if the manager is unaware of their behavior, but more often, toxic bosses are deep-rooted in their own issues, often narcissistic traits. So, a direct confrontation could backfire, leading to retaliation.
So it's kind of a gamble, right? You might get a moment of clarity, but chances are you'll just fuel the toxicity further.
Exactly. Thus, the safer route might often be personal boundary setting, focusing on self-care, and, if possible, finding alternative moves within the company, like an internal transfer. Ultimately, sometimes the best option is to leave, but that decision shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, leaving is a huge decision and, frankly, can be intimidating. But staying in a toxic environment also carries serious health risks.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the emotional toll this takes. The documentation, self-care, and reaching out are all about protecting your mental and physical well-being. Burnout is a real risk when you're continuously walking on eggshells in an environment that's designed to undermine you.
And the impact on the team as a whole can be devastating, leading to divided loyalties and a competitive rather than collaborative atmosphere. It really corrodes the workplace culture.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what could companies be doing differently to get ahead of this issue, rather than waiting until employees start meticulously documenting every instance or ultimately quitting?
That's a great point. Companies really need to establish robust checks and a feedback loop that preemptively addresses toxic behaviors rather than just paying lip service. But can that really be achieved in a system where the culture is already so, deeply entrenched?
It's a tough ask indeed. Measures could include better leadership training, clearer accountability mechanisms for managers, and even anonymous reporting channels that truly protect employees. It's a systemic change that needs to start at the top.
And yet, it's interesting how the documentation strategy is such an immediate, practical tool for the individual, almost like an insurance policy in a questionable environment.
Absolutely. It's pragmatic. Documenting incidents using that 5Ws framework not only preserves your recollection, but can also serve as a catalyst for change, internally or legally, if things spiral out of control.
It really is about taking back a bit of control, right? When a toxic manager makes you feel powerless, having a record lets you know that you have a voice and some proof, even if it's just for yourself or a future lawyer.
Exactly. And it's a stark reminder that in the face of toxicity, while you might not be able to change your boss overnight, you certainly can take steps to protect your professional and mental well-being. It starts with being informed, being methodical, and above all, valuing yourself enough to demand respect.
Well put. And if companies start noticing that good employees leave bad managers, then maybe, just maybe, these issues will finally be taken seriously. It's a wake-up call for creating healthier, more sustainable work cultures.